operating the gesture, but somehow I have absolutely don't know nothing about. And they frame me,
This is Markeith Lloyd, who's facing charges of murder in Florida.
Operating the gesture, but somehow I have absolutely don't know nothing about. And they frame me,
Lloyd, who was already serving a life sentence for killing Sadie Dixon, his pregnant ex-girlfriend, was on the run for her murder when a shopper at a Walmart spotted him on January 9th, 2017.
Lieutenant Deborah Clayton. Lloyd, you see here, walked in the door at 6:45 on the dot. And then 15 minutes later, you saw Lieutenant Deborah Clayton walk in. They both began shopping, crossing paths a couple of times, unsuspecting of what would come.
Lieutenant Deborah Clayton tried to stop him, but Lloyd shot and killed her during a shootout outside the store. After the shooting, Lloyd went on a run, and the authorities found him 9 days later. Lloyd didn't give up easily and lost his eye in an altercation with the police. Lloyd also claimed to have suffered brain damage when officers beat and kicked him during a manhunt for Clayton's killer. Lloyd's sentencing hearing was delayed due to concerns about his mental health. During the trial, he claimed to have fired at Clayton in self-defense and that he was insane at the time. However, the judge ruled him competent to continue with the sentencing hearing. As if his crimes were not horrendous enough, Lloyd's behavior in court will shock you even more.
Correct? Mr. Lloyd, watch your tone and the way you speak. Out. Out.
During the trial, Lloyd claimed he fired at Clayton in self-defense. He had also claimed to have acted in self-defense when he shot Dixon and her brother a month before Clayton was killed. He insisted that he just reacted and didn't mean to kill anyone.
I was just reacting. Even when they opened the door, I just reacted. I fired 2 shots, I just reacted.
Lloyd was sentenced to death for 5 charges, including first-degree murder of a police officer, attempted first-degree murder, aggravated assault, carjacking with a firearm, and possession of a firearm by a convicted felon. The sentence was handed down by the Ninth Circuit Judge Letitia Marquez nearly 3 months after a jury recommended the death penalty.
We, the jury, unanimously find that the defendant, Markeith Lloyd, should be sentenced to death.
Lloyd lashed out verbally after his death sentence was handed down.
You've been trying to kill me. You've been trying to bring for murder.
All right, why don't we remove Mr. Lloyd from the courtroom?
The sentence comes more than 5 years after Clayton was killed. She was 42 at the time of her death and was posthumously promoted to lieutenant. Orlando Police Chief Orlando Rulone expressed his hope that the sentence brings solace to the community, knowing that a dangerous murderer will face the highest penalty provided by law. However terrible Lloyd's actions and reactions were, this next case will shock you. Let me introduce you to Erica and Shanita. This is Erica Mae Butts and Shanita Latrice Cunningham. The couple is facing charges for the death of Serenity Richardson at a Charleston courtroom in North Carolina. In 2009, a 3-year-old girl, Serenity Richardson, was found dead. The cause of death was determined to be at the hands of her very own godmother, Erica, and her lover, Shanita. Serenity was on a 2-week holiday to Erica's house when the incident happened. The court heard that this was not the first time the woman had laid their hands on Serenity. In fact, they often had the help of a belt and plastic coat hangers. Every part of Serenity showed signs of abuse, well, except for the soles of her feet. When she became unresponsive, they tried to revive her with bleach and ice, but she was already dead by the time the medics arrived. The women claimed that Serenity had a potty incident and that they didn't know that what they did would result in her death. As if the abuse wasn't bad enough, the drama that happened in the court made the case even more touching. The trial was a highly emotional affair, and when Judge Deidre Richardson read their sentence, the 2 women collapsed, screamed uncontrollably, and hyperventilated. Court officials had to pick them up off the floor and wheel them out of the room. Butt's mother also had to be physically thrown out by 3 court officials after shouting at her daughter to get up. Prosecutor Elizabeth Gordon noted that this was the worst case she had seen in 4 years of prosecuting crimes against special victims. Erica and Shanita were both found guilty of murder and will spend the rest of their lives in prison. However outrageous you think Erica and Shanita's case and reaction was, it wasn't compared to that of Michael Madison. This is Michael Madison, who is charged with murder in Cleveland. Madison was an American convicted serial killer and sex offender from East Cleveland, Ohio. The story of Michael is not for the faint of heart. In 2013, Michael was arrested for the murders of at least 3 women over a 9-month period in 2012 and 2013. Michael was born on October 15, 1977, to Diane Madison and John Baldwin. He was the product of an accidental pregnancy, and his father denied that he was his son and had no contact with him. Michael had a tough life growing up. He had a severely abusive mother, and her boyfriends also abused him. Michael later admitted that he had mixed feelings over his mother's death. On July 19, 2013, the police received reports of a foul odor coming from a garage leased to Michael. When they investigated, they discovered a decomposing body inside. The next day, 2 more bodies were found, one in a backyard and the other in the basement of a vacant house. The 3 women's bodies were found wrapped in plastic bags and 100 to 200 yards apart. The victims were identified as Shatisha Sheely, 28, who had been missing since September 2012, Angela Deskins, 38, a resident of Cleveland who was reported missing in June 2013, and Sherelda Helen Terry, 18, who was last seen leaving a Cleveland elementary school on July 10, 2013, where she had a summer job. After obtaining a search warrant, the police entered Michael's apartment and found further evidence of decomposition. After a brief standoff with police at his mother's house, Michael was taken into custody without incident. However, there was more drama in court when Michael, showing no remorse, smirked at the father of one of his victims, prompting the father to lunge at him. Michael was charged with 3 counts of aggravated murder on July 22, 2013. In 2016, Michael was sentenced to death and is currently being held on death row.
Upon consideration of the relevant evidence, the testimony exhibits admitted in mitigation, it is the judgment of this court that the aggravated circumstances of course of conduct, felony murder kidnapping, felony murder rape, of which the defendant was convicted, outweigh the mitigating factors by proof beyond a reasonable doubt. Accordingly, the sentence of death is imposed upon the defendant Michael Madison on counts 1, 4, and 7.
He remained emotionless as his sentence was read. Michael will no longer be smirking at victims' relatives. However, even Michael would probably be shocked by the case of Diana Lovejoy. This is Diana Lovejoy, a Carlsbad woman who is in court for attempted murder and conspiracy to commit murder. Lovejoy, a 44-year-old woman from California, made headlines in September 2016 when she was found guilty of attempting to murder her ex-husband, Greg Mulvihill. The shooting occurred on a dark dirt path in Carlsbad, California, with Mulvihill being shot in the side. Lovejoy's and Mulvihill's relationship went downhill after a bitter divorce and custody battle over their son. The case was sensational, and the court heard about Lovejoy's false claims of abuse against her ex-husband. The allegations were proven to be untrue and were used as a ploy to gain sole custody of their young son. Lovejoy and McDavid met at an Oceanside gun range where he worked and subsequently engaged in an affair, despite McDavid being married. McDavid was an ex-Marine and School of Infantry instructor. Lovejoy hired him to carry out the shooting, pretending to be a private investigator and offering evidence proving that Mulvihill was abusive. You may think the case is straightforward, but wait until you hear the defense Lovejoy and McDavid put up in court. During their sentencing hearing, Lovejoy and McDavid both denied any involvement in a murder-for-hire scheme, stating that they had never intended to kill Mulvihill. Lovejoy was emotional and tearful, saying that she would never take her son's father away from him.
It's so painful that some people in this world seem to think that I would have it in me to do this.
McDavid claimed that Lovejoy had manipulated him into carrying out the shooting and that the jury had got it wrong. He insisted that with his training, if he wanted to shoot McDavid fatally, he would. Despite their claims of innocence, the prosecutor argued that both were blaming others and taking no accountability for their actions. Lovejoy was sentenced to 26 years to life in prison, while her accomplice, Welton McDavid Jr., received a 50-year sentence for pulling the trigger on the gun that shot Mulvihill. When Lovejoy heard her sentence, she collapsed on the table.
To commit murder.
However bad you think Diana Lovejoy's reaction was, it wasn't the only time a convict reacted strangely to a life sentence, like in the case of Nico Jenkins. This is Nico Allen Jenkins, who is facing charges of multiple murders in Omaha, Nebraska. Jenkins is an infamous American spree killer who began his killing spree less than 2 weeks after he was released from prison, after serving 10.5 years for a carjacking he committed at age 15, and for assaults he committed in prison. Jenkins claims that he committed the murders under the command of the ancient serpent god Apophis. Jenkins began his criminal record at the age of 7 when he was charged with bringing a gun to school. On August 11, 2013, a patrol officer discovered 2 bodies in a white Ford pickup truck parked near a city swimming pool at 18th and F Street. The 2 victims had been shot in the head, and their pockets turned inside out. They were lured to meet 2 women for a sexual encounter. The murder spree began with this random double murder less than 2 weeks after Jenkins' release from prison on July 30th. Jenkins' 4th and final victim, Andrea Kruger, was discovered on August 21st at about 2:15 a.m. by a deputy sheriff responding to a shots fired call. Her body was found lying on the road at 168th and 4th Street with multiple 12-gauge shotgun wounds to the face, neck, and shoulder. Kruger had been returning home after a bartending shift near 178th and Pacific Street. Jenkins confessed to all 4 murders during a rambling 8-hour interview. He told police that the acts were sacrifices to Apophis, a deity in the ancient Egyptian religion. Jenkins was declared competent to stand trial and was allowed to represent himself at trial under the guidance of advisory attorneys. If you thought his crimes were horrible, wait till you see how he acted in court. Throughout the trial, Jenkins maintained that he acted under the command of Apophis.
Jenkins told police that the acts were sacrifices to Apophis, a deity in the ancient Egyptian religion.
His courtroom antics included speaking in tongues, howling, and calling out the names of his victims. Jenkins' defense argued that he was suffering from mental illness, including schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, and obsessive-compulsive disorder. However, a psychiatrist concluded that Jenkins had an antisocial personality disorder and was faking psychotic symptoms. Jenkins was found guilty of the 4 murders and sentenced to death in May 2017.
Therefore, this panel finds that the death penalty is appropriate, should be, and is hereby given for each of the 4 murders by the defendant.
Surprisingly, he remained unremorseful and emotionless.